From WSKG Public Radio, this is Off the Page, a forum for writers from our region. I'm Bill Jacob. Most medical doctors do a lot of writing. They have to write prescriptions or sign their name on forms so many times each day that their handwriting can turn into an unintelligible scrawl. Some medical schools now have instruction in penmanship. But when it comes to really writing, authoring, doctors can often feel that it's just not their specialization. One exception is Bernard Leo Remakus, MD of Halstead, Pennsylvania. In addition to his medical practice in internal medicine, he is also a medical journalist, essayist, and the author of 2 novels with a medical theme. His newest book is a collection of essays called Medicine from the Heart, and he has another book, Medicine Between the Lines, due out soon. Dr. Remakus is with us today. Welcome to Off the Page.
Thank you very much, Bill. Glad to be here.
Yeah, they call you a country doctor, I suppose, because you're down in Susquehanna County, just across the state line from Binghamton. There is also the tendency to, I always add the words old-fashioned when you say country doctor. But in Medicine from the Heart, you write about a lot of patients that you know and cases that you've handled, and I know that you probably change names of people and details of their cases, but when you're writing about your own patients, do you have to go back to them or their families, ask permission to write about that case, and did you maybe in writing about people discover things that you didn't know as you were treating them? Well,
whenever I'm going to write a story that I think involves a family or a specific patient, I usually discuss it with them. Mm-hmm. And most of these stories have been previously published in various medical journals, and I have never had an incident where the story wasn't so strong that the family wasn't thrilled to be able to share their life experience with other people, especially with people in medicine. And we always do change names, mm-hmm. only for everybody's privacy. But other than that, the facts speak for themselves.
Of course, I suppose if you are practicing medicine in a rural area or in places where they say everybody knows everybody else, even if you do change names and some details, can't people tell just who they are and maybe indicate, gee, that was my neighbor. Sure sounds a lot like him.
The amazing thing that you find is that there are so many stories that are alike. And one thing that I found in my writing, even in the novel, in Cassidy's Solution, I had a number of people from 3 separate towns call me and say, I know who you're writing about. And they were telling me about people in their own towns, and the 3 of them were all wrong.
Wow.
So the thing is that oftentimes a lot of these stories might even be components of different life stories of a few different people put together as one story, which still makes a very strong point. A lot of times, if a patient has a very unique problem and they don't want people to know about it, you obviously, as a physician, maintain total privacy. You respect the privacy of your patient. Frequently, an entire town will know about a patient's problem.
Oh, yeah.
And it's public knowledge before you even sit down and entertain the idea about even writing about it.
Mm-hmm. But you write both for the professional journals, for the medical journals. You're on the editorial advisory board of...
Up to this past year, I was associated with Internal Medicine World Report for 12 years.
Oh, okay.
We've ended that association a few months ago. I'm devoting most of my writing time now to getting out a bunch of books that have been occupying a lot of space in word processors for a number of years. So we've sort of changed gears just a little bit. We took the column. It was one of the most widely read and longest-running columns in American medical journalism for 12 years. And we took it to a whole different height. And it got to the point where I wanted to pursue a few different things, bring out a couple books that I could share with the general public. The physicians of America already pretty much know what's on my mind.
Yeah.
I wanted, as in Medicine from the Heart, I wanted to be able to go ahead and to bring out stories that could be of value to the everyday person who is sort of confused about what's happening in healthcare in America today.
Mm-hmm. And maybe say things to them that maybe their own doctors never would say to them?
The unfortunate thing in America today is that doctors have been programmed to just be too busy. Mm-hmm. And it's not, I mean, the obvious motivation that most people think, well, these guys just want to go ahead and they want to make a lot of money. But it actually, it starts with roots in medical school and through the residency training where physicians in training are forced to see so many people and do so many things and only spend a minimum amount of time producing so much and handling so many emergencies at the same time that they don't know any other way to exist.
Yeah.
And so when they come out into a practice, it just becomes standard that you come out and you see X number of people per day because this is what doctors do.
And the doctors really are not the ones who schedule the patients.
They're not. And again, the other thing, too, is oftentimes a lot of the managed care organizations, they expect physicians to go ahead and to see heroic numbers of people each day. One of the reasons that I gave up the opportunity to go practice in a big city and went to the country was because I just had a different mindset and a different set of needs. And one of them wasn't going ahead and seeing 100 people a day just so that I could fit in with some group somewhere and going ahead and spending my time doing things that I didn't really want to be doing or around people that I really didn't want to be around. I wanted to go someplace. I wanted to go to a rural area where I could raise my family, spend time with my family. You know, one of the things that's in Medicine from the Heart is a story about an old doctor that I worked with one time, and I spent some time working with. And after my wife and I spent a little bit of time working with him for a few weeks in the country, his wife grabbed us on the side and said, you know, she said, we have only one regret. She said, we never got to know our children, and our children never got to know us. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. You could have dropped a safe on me, and it would have had less impact than that woman saying that to us. And my wife and I, and this is before we even started our family, this is when we were just in the earliest years of our own marriage. We looked at each other, and there was such a loud message there that we were sort of convinced that we wanted a different type of lifestyle, and that's why we went to the country where you make the time and where people demand the time. And if you didn't spend enough time with them in the office, they call you at night. And if your line is busy at night, they come and they knock at your door because they know where you're at.
Oh, sure. And it isn't just doctor heal yourself, but doctor provide the conditions for a healthy life for yourself.
Absolutely. You have to take care of yourself. I believe that my entire life. And I have never seen the wisdom of going ahead and not taking care of your own health as a physician or being unhappy with your life as a physician and being miserable your entire life. I mean, what's the point of that? When you could go ahead and take a little bit extra time, you're going to see less patients. But if you take the time to physically take care of yourself and maintain your own psychological well-being, I think you're a lot more productive and a lot better off to the people that you take care of.
Oh, sure. And just remind everybody, if you're tuned in to Off the Page at 13 and a half minutes after 1 in the afternoon, we are live and we welcome your calls for Dr. Bernard Leo Remakus. The phone number is 1-888-359-9754. That's 1-888-359-9754, and that is a different number from the number you should call to become a member of WSKG. We'll tell you about that later. We'll also watch your comments and questions by email to wskg@stny.rr.com. So please join in either way, 1-888-359-9754 or wskg@stny.rr.com. A few months ago, we had some guests on this program, Doctors David Swan and Alan Kozak from Bassett Healthcare in Cooperstown. They collected stories, essays, poems that were written as an assigned part of training of third-year medical students and interns at Bassett Healthcare. And they put out a book with a title very similar to yours, as a matter of fact. It's called Let Me Listen to Your Heart. And wonderful, beautiful writing in here. But these are writers who, for the first time, I suppose, maybe seeing people with fibromyalgia, end-stage dementia, whatever it may be. You have been an MD for 25 years, Dr. Remakus. Do things start looking different for a doctor after a period of time than they would for somebody who is just beginning in the profession? Do you begin to get a different kind of view, both of your profession, of the healthcare system, and of the patients you got to deal with?
Oh, absolutely. You go through different cycles depending on who you are as a person and depending on what level of your profession you're at. Obviously, a young kid who's in their early 20s and they're seeing crises for the first time in their life, they've had relatively crisis-free lives. They've gone through wonderful high school experiences where they were probably star athletes and where they were scholars, and they went to colleges where they had very good experiences. Now, a couple years later, they're being expected to see an awful lot of horror. They're going into big city emergency rooms and seeing people with all kind of shotgun wounds and car accidents and people overdoses on drugs and seeing massive heart attacks and seeing people that have had all types of injuries that require heroic efforts within an emergency room. And they're looking at things for the first time. So obviously, when they sit back after this is all over and they try to put their feelings and their thoughts on paper, that's one way that you're going to get some type of true emotion portrayed by a person who's really lived with it. As you go through your profession, and you've seen this many times, obviously you become inured with a lot of the horror of medicine. A lot of times when I teach medical students, they come to me and they say, I just want to know, how do you handle it? How do you, if you know that you're going to go in an emergency room and there's a car wreck in there or somebody's been shot, how do you handle it? How you know that you're going to see a lot of really horrible stuff. What are you thinking about when you go in there? And you say to them, you don't look at the blood. You don't look at the wounds. You don't look at anything other than the fact that there's a person underneath it all that needs your help. And that's what gets you through it. You look right for the person, and you see right through it. So at different stages, you're going to react differently to the same type of problems. Also, when you're in your training, you're protected from a lot of the things that you have to deal with as a physician who has to pay bills, who has to be accountable to agencies all over the world for everything that you do. Physicians today are scrutinized over everything that you do. If you
and not just by other physicians.
No, you have the government agencies looking over your shoulder, licensing boards looking over your shoulder. You have the entire world looking at everything you do.
Yeah.
So it's an entirely different phenomenon.
You mentioned Medicine from the Heart. You have a story about meeting with some medical students and not telling them that you were a doctor, but asking somewhat naive questions. I wonder just what sort of reaction you did get out of them.
Well, it's funny because when you talk to kids that still haven't been accepted to medical school, they're in a pre-med program at some college, and you don't tell them who you are. You're there in a pair of jeans and you have a sweatshirt on. In fact, if I'm in that situation or if I'm someplace else out to dinner or whatever, I always try to give people the impression that I load trucks for a living.
Not a difficult impression again.
I really do, because I'll tell you something. I've worked my way through every educational level that I've been at, and I've loaded an awful lot of trucks to be able to finance my education, and I'm proud of it. So the thing is that rather than go ahead and tip in the whole scale, oh, yeah, I'm a physician, and, yeah, by the way, I've written X number of books, and, yeah, I've done this, and I've done this, and I'm in this who's who and that what's what. You just go ahead and you listen to the other people tell about all their stories in which they have an awful lot of pride, and you sit back, and about 2 days later, they finally say, oh, and by the way, what was your name again, and what do you do for a living? At which point, the thing that I've done for a lot of years, I say, well, I coach high school baseball, and they say, well, you have you look like you're pretty well to do. You coach high school baseball, and I say, well, I'm a very good coach.
The thing is, when people find out that you're a doctor, they're going to approach you differently. They're going to talk to you differently, and they're going to expect that somehow you can heal something about them just by your presence. I mean,
that's correct.
How do you feel about being on that kind of platform?
The worst thing that you can do is allow yourself to be elevated to an artificial platform, because the problem is the higher the platform gets, the harder the fall when you finally trip and fall down.
Yeah.
I find it a lot more successful rather than going ahead and trying to show people how stupid they are. I've spent so many more years in education and learning a profession than they do. I found it a lot more helpful to go ahead and to try to get on an equal plane with people and speak a language they understand and try to just speak as one human being to another. I find that it's an awful lot more effective, and it's a lot more rewarding, and you get an awful lot more respect, and you get an awful lot more compliance as a physician when people think that you're number one, their friend, and number two, their doctor. There are too many things that confuse people about having a doctor today. There are not an awful lot of things about, hey, I got another friend, and boy, I'm glad to have him.
Oh, yeah. Well, to remind everybody, our phone number here for questions for Dr. Bernard Leo Remakus is 1-888-359-9754, 888-359-WSKG. And we've got a call from another doctor, as a matter of fact, in Oneonta, Dr. Friedel. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This is Dr. Ben Friedel calling from Oneonta.
Yeah, we have a paradox on the program now. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
My question for your guest was, one of the things I began doing 18 years ago when I came to a small town up here was I started keeping a journal, writing down mostly about cases that I had, and I found that very helpful over the years. And I know that I've spoken to your previous guest, Dr. Savan, about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if your guest did that at all when he first started out, when he first became interested. Did he keep a journal of patients he encountered or situations he encountered before he began writing articles for magazines?
No, actually, Doctor, I didn't. I've never really done that, but I think it's a fabulous idea because you never know the day that you sit down and you say, I can do one of these too. And I have all this stuff stored up, and it's a lot easier if you have something already put aside for yourself that you can refer to and easily access. The things that I write about are spur of the moment. It might be 3 o'clock in the morning that something hits me, and I sit down to the word processor for an hour and I write it as it hits me. To me, that's the way that I write, and it's the way that my writing has the greatest impact. But the idea that you're proposing, I think, is a great idea for just about anybody.
Let me ask both of you, what would be the difference between keeping a journal, writing an essay, and the normal kinds of medical records that you have to keep about every patient that you meet? Dr. Friedel, how do you feel about that?
Well, actually, in many ways, they're similar. It's taken me years in practice to realize that when a patient is telling their story, or you're taking a history from a patient, they're telling you a story. And one of the things that we learn in medical school that we have to keep relearning is to just let the patient tell their story. We're so tempted to interrupt, to jump in. But as they tell their story, and then when we write it, we're writing the history. It helps if it's written in a cogent, logical fashion that somebody can follow. So there is a link between the type of writing that one does in a journal or for an essay or in a book and what you're writing in your case report. I think there's a definite crossover.
I agree with you 100%. There's a tremendous crossover. I think the only difference is that when you go ahead and you're trying to show a human emotion, you're getting away from the matter-of-fact type of thing that you have to do in a limited fashion within a progress note to actually tell a story. You get a little bit more artistic, and that's the part of the writing that I like the most. But you're absolutely right, and I think that you bring up a very important point. I think it's a natural thing for physicians to be communicators. I think it's a natural thing for physicians to be able to be writers, because look how much of it we really have to do within our own professional confines. We have to record everything that we do, everything that's critical to a case. We have to put down on paper for everybody to see. And it's a part of our nature. So I think if you want to or not, I think you become a pretty good writer with time.
I think you do, and I think we spend so much of our time talking with and writing to patients, advocating on behalf of our patients to insurance companies or other people, and also communicating as physicians. We have to learn to communicate among each other precisely and yet tell the story properly so that our colleague understands what's going on.
I agree 100%.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much for your call.
You're
and
welcome.
for
listening to your guest. It's fascinating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, our number here, 1-888-359-9754. You don't have to be a doctor to call, but I think that was just an interesting exchange here. I'm going to ask you to read one of the stories out of Medicine from the Heart, give everybody a flavor for what it is that you wrote in here. This is a story called Wild Bill and Roy.
Wild Bill and Roy. Hidden in the office files of one of my patients is a photograph of two men. The first man in the photo would probably not be recognized by most of the people who live within shouting distance of his home, while the second man would undoubtedly be recognized by millions of people all over the world. Although the two men traveled widely divergent roads before their brief meeting was preserved in a photo, both had a great deal in common. Both were born and raised in the North before migrating to various points south. Both were once employed as fruit pickers, and both were proud to be thought of as cowboys. Although my patient Wild Bill and his friend Roy had even more in common, they lived most of their adult lives in two entirely different worlds. Wild Bill's world was one of simplicity and essentials, while Roy's world was one of glamour and riches. Those who knew Wild Bill understood that his name better reflected who he wanted to be than who he actually was. Wild Bill wanted to be a cowboy who wore a white hat, rode a magnificent stallion, and packed a pair of glimmering six-shooters. In reality, though, Wild Bill was a quiet, diminutive man who spent the 50 years of his life coexisting with cerebral palsy, a speech impediment, various crippling injuries, nagging medical conditions, and life-threatening cardiac abnormalities. Boots and saddles occupied little space in Wild Bill's real life, but a prominent space in his dreams. It's not surprising, then, that Wild Bill idolized the king of the cowboys, Roy Rogers, and dreamed of one day meeting his hero. Roy was everything Wild Bill wanted to be, a larger-than-life cowboy who used his healthy body and strong voice to enforce the code of the West. Of course, Roy Rogers won the hearts of senoritas and foiled the bad guys more on the silver screen than in real life, but it was in real life where Roy's star shined the brightest. His movies and television shows were the magnets Roy Rogers used to attract his ardent fans, but it was in his real-life meetings with many of these fans, the crippled children, the terminally ill adults, and the ageless handicapped, where the singing cowboy made his greatest impact. Roy Rogers was a straight shooter and a plain talker who didn't leave his act in reels of celluloid. In many ways, he was a doctor who used sincere compassion, a friendly voice, and a warm smile to treat the pain and suffering of his unfortunate fans. Roy Rogers didn't possess a medical degree or a well-stocked pharmacy, and he didn't dispense cures. To his ill and injured patients, he provided something too potent to be bottled and too unique to be synthesized in a laboratory. To those who came seeking his help, Roy Rogers provided the gift of hope. One of medicine's most poorly understood phenomena deals with a person's sense of imminent death. By all diagnostic parameters, a patient may be judged to be in good health, but that patient may still sense and occasionally report that he or she is dying. Shortly after his 50th birthday, Wild Bill began to sense that he was dying. Despite contrary opinions and reassurances from a number of different cardiologists, Wild Bill felt that he was not long for this world. Reiterating an earlier vow to meet Roy Rogers before he died, Wild Bill traveled to the California town where his hero lived. Making his presence known and intentions known to the owner of a popular restaurant in that town, Wild Bill was told that Roy would be notified pronto that some varmint was looking for him. That following day, as Wild Bill sipped coffee in the restaurant, he was tapped on the shoulder by an elderly man dressed in conservative Western attire. Although the cowboy's appearance was older than anticipated, his friendly voice and unmistakable smile made Wild Bill quickly realize that a lifelong dream had finally come true and that he was actually shaking hands with Roy Rogers. Following a memorable conversation and brief photo session, Wild Bill returned to his winter residence in Florida. A few weeks later, he died unexpectedly. After Wild Bill's funeral, his family gave me the photograph he had taken with Roy Rogers. During many office visits, Wild Bill and I reminisced about Roy Rogers, Dale Evans, Gabby Hayes, the Sons of the Pioneers, and a horse named Trigger, and his family knew that the photograph would have special meaning for me. For the past few years, the photograph has been kept in Wild Bill's office folder. In all honesty, I've looked at the photo on numerous occasions, and seeing it has never failed to bring a smile to my face or a number of pertinent concepts to mind. Whenever I look at the photo of Wild Bill and Roy, I see a little boy who never grew up receiving the gift of hope from another little boy who never grew up. Whenever I look at the photo, I am reminded that caring is about people and not about pills, diagnostic tests, or healthcare delivery systems, and I am humbled by the overwhelming power of the human spirit. On July 6, 1998, Roy Rogers died of congestive heart failure at his home in California. He was 86 years old. Since his death, he's been remembered both publicly and privately in many different ways. Roy Rogers has been remembered as a star of the silver screen, a cowboy, a singer, a shrewd businessman, and a man of fame and fortune. If a photo in my possession counts for anything, I'd say that Roy Rogers should also be remembered as an honorary doctor. He treated fear with a smile, uncertainty with a kind word, and despair with hope. Many physicians work wonders with their many different medical and surgical skills. Roy Rogers did the same with a therapeutic regimen that always seemed to suggest happy trails.
Dr. Bernard Leo Remakus reading from his book, Medicine from the Heart. And if you're listening at 1:30 in the afternoon, our number 1-888-359-9754. 888-359-9754 to talk about doctors and their writing and their views. And that is, by the way, consistent with everything I've ever heard about Roy Rogers. He was a very generous man, really liked meeting people. But I have heard some doctors say that very often the patients come to them and there's really nothing wrong with them. Have you ever had that experience that there was somebody who just don't feel well? I don't know what it is, and there's really nothing wrong with them.
Well, if it's in your mind, it's in you. If you feel that there's something wrong, there probably is. Unfortunately, with all the diagnostic testing that's available, oftentimes the physician who already called here before alluded to the fact that we need to be trained as physicians to listen more. In fact, there was one of the legends of medicine, a man by the name of William Osler, who taught medical students and residents and young doctors that if you listen long enough, the patient will tell you what's wrong with them. And if you listen just a little bit longer, they'll even tell you how to fix it. And nothing truer has ever been said. So when patients come to you, there are often times when people come and everybody says, oh, it's just in their head. But you'd be surprised the number of times when you do a couple tests and it's really not in their head. There are people that they imagine a lot of illnesses that they really don't have. There is no question about that. There is such a thing as a patient being a hypochondriac. Oh, yeah. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of other people, just because their families can't really understand what the problem is, it doesn't mean that they don't have problems. Or even if they don't have significant health problems, it doesn't mean that the psychological consequences aren't really bothersome to them.
Oh, sure. But, you mentioned, I know this is one of the major themes in your book and something you've been very concerned about, that most of the malpractice cases that physicians have to face in this country, you feel would not happen if they just communicated a little bit better. So
I do.
Not only should the doctor listen to the patient, but the patient should be able to understand something from the doctor and be able to stay with them. But how do you mean that about... apparently, even if a doctor does make a mistake, and they do on occasion, there's been a story in the news recently about a woman who was given a double mastectomy, and it was later discovered that there had been a mistake in the lab, apparently, and that there was really nothing wrong with her at all. It was totally mistaken.
Right.
So the doctors can make mistakes, and they should have to be called to account for it. But
absolutely,
you feel still that good communication could avoid most of those legal problems.
Absolutely. I have a story, an essay within the book about exactly that type of case where a physician made a mistake. A physician went ahead and put a wrong lens in a wonderful woman who had a cataract and had the cataract extracted and who needed another lens, and the wrong lens was put in. And the woman discovered that her sight was getting very poor, and she was getting to the point where she was just about ready to go blind with it. And rather than sitting down and explaining to her that this is a rare mistake, it's not something we do every day of the week, but it's a rare mistake that does happen, and here's what we're going to do about it. We're going to schedule you tomorrow and put in the right lens. Rather than doing this physician essentially made the patient feel like, well, it's no big deal. It happens all the time, and you're going to Arizona for the winter. So just see an ophthalmologist out there, and I'll take care of it. Well, fact of the matter is that when the woman came back and the Arizona ophthalmologist was less than pleased with what had happened and told her that this should have been handled a lot differently when she received the incorrect implant here. When she came back, her and her husband came over to me and they said, how should we handle this? And I said, well, it's obvious that a mistake was made. Why don't you go and talk to the doctor about it? And they tried to talk to the doctor about it, but he refused to talk to them because his insurance company would not allow him to talk about a potential lawsuit. And rather than just sit down with him and say, look, I made a mistake. I don't know. I can't even explain why the wrong lens was there for me to implant, but we have to trace it down because we can't have that type of mistake happen again. But I'm sorry for the mistake. It was a mistake, and I accept responsibility for it. Rather than that, he just kept turning them off by having his secretary saying, well, no, the doctor's too busy to talk to you. He can't talk to you now. No, he can't reschedule you because you're no longer his patient. You went to Arizona or whatever. And the fact of the matter is that I said to these people after it was all over and after they had no recourse but to file a lawsuit, which they won and settled out of court, I said to these people, I know you very well, and we've always been honest with each other. I'm very interested in this topic. What would it have taken for that doctor to have said to you so that you wouldn't have gone ahead and sued him for malpractice? And these people were well-to-do. They didn't need money, but they felt that they were being treated with less than respect. And they said, all we wanted was him to say, I made a mistake, and I'm sorry.
Of course, when a doctor makes a mistake, it could be a big mistake.
Absolutely.
It could be a very big mistake.
This is a clear-cut type thing with which had a positive ending. There are catastrophes that happen. I mean, it's catastrophic when a patient has one kidney filled with cancer, and their only hope to survive is to have that kidney taken out. And they go ahead with good faith to a competent surgeon, and for whatever reason, the wrong kidney is taken out. And so a good kidney is destroyed, and the patient is still left with a non-functioning kidney that's filled with cancer.
I think this is not a theoretical.
This is not beyond the theoretical. This is something that is a severe problem, and this is the type of thing where a patient has to have recourse to go ahead and to have economic needs fulfilled and have some type of justice brought, because this is a serious mistake. But most of the cases of medical malpractice in the United States, and this is not just my theory, this is substantiated, back in the 90s, in 1990 when I wrote The Malpractice Epidemic, it was theorized that 87% of all the malpractice cases being filed at that time were frivolous, without a basis. And a lot of them were being confused with maloccurrence, which is simply it didn't work out the way the patient wanted it to, but it doesn't mean that the doctor did anything wrong. Any patient can come to a physician and he could put them on an antibiotic. They might develop chronic diarrhea from the antibiotic. That doesn't mean that the doctor did anything wrong. If he was treating their pneumonia or their pericarditis with an antibiotic and they developed a severe antibiotic-related diarrhea, it doesn't mean that the doctor did anything wrong. But he can't just say, well, it'll go away. What he has to do is the appropriate test and treat the diarrhea. That's the appropriate step. But in the early 90s, people were suing doctors for this.
Right. You think malpractice is part of our active vocabulary. Maloccurrence is a word we don't hear very often.
I coined it in 1990. Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Okay. Again, our phone number here, 1-888-359-9754. If you're listening at 1:37 in the afternoon, on Off the Page with Dr. Bernard Leo Remakus.
By the way, Bill, maloccurrence has been accepted as a very common term, and I'm happy. If my existence on this earth was to coin the term maloccurrence, I'm happy to have done it.
The doctors seem like they are so hedged in, though, because we were speaking before about how exalted people are, the feelings about medical doctors. And yet you've got, on the one hand, you've got all the professional review boards, you've got the insurance companies, you've got state regulations, and you've got all those malpractice lawyers over there. And do you see any way the doctors can navigate their way through all of this? Because you hear a lot about so-called defensive medicine.
Well, that's an interesting point. There are a couple specific things to understand this whole malpractice thing. You've heard the old saying that figures don't lie and liars don't figure. Well,
I've heard of figures don't lie, but liars figure. That's
liars don't figure, yeah.
Okay.
Well, the thing is that if you look at the whole situation, you have, like, for example, in Pennsylvania, you have Governor Rendell talking about he has a plan to reform malpractice. You have President Bush talking about his plan, and they're widely different, and physicians are caught in between, and nobody really understands any of them. And the fact of the matter is everybody's saying, well, should we have caps? Shouldn't we have caps? What should we do here? What should we do about reforming the law? And it's a real simple fix. And to understand the fix, you have to understand a few very simple facts. First of all, in a malpractice case for the last 15, 20 years in America, the patient takes home 28% of the award. So there's 72% of that award that really seems to be the area where somebody has to start doing some work. Not the 28% that the patient's getting, the 72% that the patient doesn't see. And where that goes is that the lawyers take a third to a half of it, plus they hire a whole cadre of professional experts to go ahead and back up their case in court. And you really don't need 10 different doctors to say the same thing, that they feel that this other doctor did the wrong type of thing. That's one fact. Another fact is that in the year 2000, the last time that anybody has comprehensive statistics, New York State led the United States in malpractice awards. They gave out $650 million in malpractice awards. Pennsylvania was second with $390 million. Now, this isn't even the tip of the iceberg, because it's been estimated that American doctors collectively spend about $100 billion a year practicing defensive medicine, all because of the premise that if there's not some type of evidence on a patient's chart, something might happen down the line that might implicate this physician as practicing something incorrectly and causing damage. Perfect example. Patient comes into your office with a cold. You don't need to get a chest x-ray for a patient's cold, but there are doctors who will, for a very simple reason, because they don't want anything 10 years down the line to happen to this patient who might be a heavy smoker, and they don't want anybody to say, well, you didn't have a chest x-ray 10 years ago. How do we know that this patient's cancer didn't start then? So the whole vicious cycle starts where the doctor goes ahead and gets a chest x-ray. Now, it might be a totally normal chest x-ray, but a lot of radiologists aren't going to read it just as a totally normal chest x-ray, because they're also worried about trying to protect themselves. So a lot of radiologists will put a little hedge in there. They'll say, well, this appears to be grossly a normal chest X-ray. However, there's a slight shadow behind one of the ribs, which might be just on the basis of technique or positioning or could be artifact. But if it's clinically advised, we advise that you get a CAT scan.
Oh, boy.
Well, now that being written on paper, the doctor then goes ahead and calls the patient in and says, a doctor who practices totally defensive medicine, we have a little problem here. We don't think it's anything, but just to be on the safe side, we need to go ahead now and get a CAT scan. So there are two tests that, because of this vicious cycle that's been set in by defensive medicine, there are two tests that run necessary for this patient. And these two tests, when you add up with all the millions of people that are getting this type of care, you know, we have over 40 million people in America that have no health insurance, and probably more than that have inadequate health insurance. You know, with all this defensive medicine, if we could go ahead and get on a common ground and say we're going to start handling malpractice differently, we could start taking care of everybody, and everybody would be able to see a doctor when they needed it. If we could just even eliminate the 72% that doesn't matter, that the patient never gets anyway, and if we could go ahead and start curbing billions of dollars of unnecessary defensive medicine.
How do you, though, protect the patient as well as a doctor at the same time?
Communication. What you need to do, you have to practice medicine. Medical students oftentimes ask me, what do you think is the most valuable tool that you have? They want to know, is it the stethoscope or is it the defibrillator? What is it? What would be the one thing? And I point to the phone. The telephone is my most valuable tool because it allows me, if I see something abnormal, if I'm concerned, to call a patient. And you'd be amazed at how far, if you're thinking about a patient, you're sitting thinking about a patient, and you know they haven't been feeling well. You know they might have family problems. You know they might be depressed. Picking up a phone and unexpectedly calling a patient and saying, hey, how you doing today? I was just thinking about you. How's that cold? You getting better? You okay? The stuff's working for you? You're feeling better? Hey, I was just thinking about you. Just thought I'd call just to make sure you're okay. That goes so far in patients realizing that you're not only their friend, but that it goes so far in terms of gaining you respect and being able to communicate so that the patient knows, you know, I'm not better. I better call him because maybe we should get that chest X-ray. He told me when I was in that, you got a cold. We don't need an X-ray at this time. But if it gets worse, you know, maybe it'll be a good idea to possibly check it because you never know what might be developing. They're the ones that call you and ask for it.
Right. We, too, have a phone, by the way, for your questions or your comments for Dr. Remakus, 1-888-359-9754, 888-359-9754. You wonder what would ever happen if a doctor who had already maybe been hit with a couple of malpractice cases and did have some resentment against lawyers and the whole system suddenly had to take care of a malpractice attorney who showed up in his office, and that maybe this doctor is a single guy who would love to have a woman in his life, and this was an attractive, beautiful, bright malpractice lawyer. That, of course, is the beginning of the plot of Cassidy's Solution of your novel you wrote, 1995. What motivated you to become a novelist and to write that kind of story? Because sounds a little autobiographical. I don't know. It's set in at least this area.
When you get
the setting, I should say, sounds like it's autobiographical.
Well, the setting is Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania, and it's a mythical town called Roaring Fork.
Not to be confused with the restaurant in Vestal.
No,
okay.
No. In fact, subconsciously, I believe I ate there once or twice, and perhaps subconsciously, maybe. Who knows how even the name came about, but
but all the other names are real. You're talking about Binghamton and Scranton and Elk Mountain. And this woman's been skiing
and
up at Elk Mountain.
Roaring Fork is somewhere in the middle. And we also talk about Alps and Weisseldorf, which I'm sure most people have visited on their way to Germany. And when Dame Bielawa von Hessenschlott, that's where she comes from, Alps and Weisseldorf. So
but you get into a situation here where apparently you've got a malpractice attorney who wants to come to this doctor because she's afraid if she goes to a hospital in Scranton where she sued everybody, she is not going to get good medical care. Was there any reality behind that? Any real experience?
There's an awful no personal experiences. I mean, this is my fantasy woman. This is Wonder Woman. The depths of my fantasy created Angela Fratella, better known as the Angel of Death, the greatest malpractice lawyer in the country. A beautiful woman who's a ballerina, who's a black belt in karate, who goes ahead and she's a philanthropist. She's charitable.
If you're creating the character, you can make
Boy, I'm telling you. Yeah. I'm telling you, the nights that went into falling in love with this woman I was creating on paper, it's unbelievable. But actually, the whole story is based in a lot of different ways on bits and pieces of reality, and it's sort of put together in a fantasy type thing. What would happen if this doctor who moved to a small rural area in Pennsylvania and who hated the area, who only moved there to take over his dying father's medical practice. He hated the area. He hated the people. He couldn't stand what he was doing, and he's being sued in all these frivolous malpractice cases by people he doesn't even remember. And all of a sudden, he's heard about this legendary angel of death from Scranton, who every doctor she sues and wins $25 million for her clients.
And all of a sudden, a lot for her also, I imagine.
An awful lot for her.
Very rich. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, one night, it's in January, and he's freezing. He's trying to keep the pipes from thawing. He has an old wooden furnace that he's trying to feed. He's feeding himself with some old granddad bourbon to try to stay warm. And a knock on the door, and the most magnificent woman he's ever seen walks in with a case of osteomyelitis of her foot.
Wow.
And as he starts to take care of her, he doesn't realize that he's taking care of the most famous malpractice lawyer in the United States. So that's the fantasy, but actually it is very factual, because I know an awful lot of lawyers who have complained to me that they have a tough time getting medical care for their families because they've been involved. These are a number of lawyers who have been involved in malpractice suits, and they felt a certain type of resentment. They felt it was difficult. They felt that they were trying to, every time they sneezed, they had to get a second opinion. If they came in with a common cold, they had to go see a pulmonologist. They had to go see an ENT specialist because their primary care physician didn't want to risk something happening.
Wow.
They felt they got extraordinary medical care, to say the least.
You read Cassidy's solution, and it's obvious that this was either written by a doctor or somebody who had done a lot of research in medicine. The medical descriptions are very, very thorough. What about the legal matters, though, in here? Did you have to consult with lawyers on just what you were writing in this? Or?
When I wrote The Malpractice Epidemic, I consulted with a number of lawyers and talked to them just, quite frankly, across the table type things, over a drink type thing, not like, I have these inquiries that I need you to answer. Plus, as a medical journalist, I've been privy to an awful lot of information a lot of times before it even hit the mainstream. And so I was privy to an awful lot of information about the realities that went into a lot of the studies that were being used in courts of law, being used in legal research and medical research. And I had the opportunity to actually see how these different things came about. So I had the opportunity to really investigate the concept of malpractice, probably in a way that very few people that write about it have ever been able to do. As a physician and as a journalist who got behind the scenes and who oftentimes got information that people didn't even realize why they were giving you the information, where it was finally going to take your thinking process.
Right, because one of the climactic scenes in the novel, the entire medical staff at this small hospital there in Pennsylvania, which again I suppose is totally fictional.
That totally is fictional. Like I told you, very seriously, in Cassidy's solution, I have been in a number of different rural settings in my professional life, and so I've seen a lot of similarities. So the people that are in this book, as far as like the doctors at these hospitals and the way that the hospitals work, are a composite of a lot of different places. And the reason, when Cassidy came out, I got 3 different phone calls, one from somebody in Montrose, one from somebody in Halstead, and one from somebody in Susquehanna, all telling me that they knew who Teddy Edwards was. Teddy Edwards is the bad guy in the book. He's this corrupt real estate mogul who
wants to buy out the whole county.
He wants to own the entire county. And 3 different people called up and said, did you ever talk to this guy about writing about him? And I said, that's not who this book was. In fact, Teddy Edwards, in all honesty, was he was created the night that I watched Dragnet. And I watched Dabney Coleman playing that sleazy guy that was the porno king, and he talked with a lisp, and he had the mustache that wiggled, and he had the cigar. Teddy Edwards was patterned after, in fact, my son, my oldest son, Chris, and I always talk about if this becomes a movie, who's going to play it, and we always have an argument, because I always say, Dabney Coleman is going to definitely play it, and he says, no, Robert Duvall has to play. No, it's definitely going to be Dabney Coleman. That's where he was created. He doesn't live in Susquehanna County.
Well, still, the conflict that's going on here is obviously between the doctor and most of his colleagues. I mean, I must say he and this young malpractice attorney become quite intimate in the course of the story, and yet at the same time she does suffer an accident at the end. She does then herself become the plaintiff in a malpractice case. and a very, very strange trial in which I think she commits perjury at one point in the trial. But nonetheless, she does win the case. I'm not going to tell exactly how the story turns out. I don't know if you want to reveal.
Oh, absolutely not.
The very end of the story.
It's an interesting thing because Cassidy Solution was put up by a publisher that actually was forced out of business the first month the book came out. So actually, very few people have had the opportunity to really ever read Cassidy Solution. So probably one of the things down the line will be to bring Cassidy Solution back out so that people today it probably would make more sense than it did back in 1995. Yeah. But the book did fabulous when it first came out, but the publisher actually was forced out of business. And in fact, the book was even read by a Hollywood producer, an independent producer who wanted to make a movie out of it, but couldn't come up with the funding at that time. They were doing all the Stallone and Schwarzenegger stuff, and if you didn't have an action thing where somebody had like a special type of weapon that was about 14 feet long and in a car that had like 400 miles an hour and low, you didn't sell the book.
Wow. Sounds like publishing malpractice to me. I think
yeah, you got it.
Oh, they're really bad.
A lot of that around.
I understand. You have 3 kids.
Right.
And all of them, it seems, would like to be doctors. They're studying now. I think one is in medical school right now.
2 of them are in medical school, and my oldest son, Chris, is a third year, finishing his 3rd year at Temple Medical. My daughter, Allie, is finishing her 1st year at Temple Medical. And my youngest son, Matt, is in the honors program, undergraduate in pre-med at Temple. And hopefully he'll be going. And the obvious question is, well, why, especially with all the things that are happening in medicine today, why would you steer your kids into medicine? I never advised medicine for any of my 3 children. This is their own independent things. And, again, we've been very close. My family's my life. And I've been very close with my kids. I've been there every step of the way with them. My kids have never gone to bat in a ball game at either high school or college that I haven't been there to see. I've had priorities in life that always haven't been just sitting around waiting for the phone to ring with somebody having a cold. And the kids all essentially decided on their own that they wanted to enter the field of medicine, which I am obviously promoting very much, but it was never at my suggestion. It was that they saw what I did. They liked what I did, and they wanted to do it with their own lives. And the 3 of them are doing super.
Yeah, that's wonderful. But have they been telling you as they go through medical school what it is that they are learning? And do you think that they're getting enough of the humanistic aspect of medicine?
I graduated from medical school in 1978, and since that time, they have made overt attempts to try to correct the fact that everybody just was sort of taught back then how to run an assembly line. You were taught to see X number of people in X number of hours and still wind up without losing your mind doing it. Now the kids are being subjected to all types of communications type things where, like for example at Temple, they actually have to examine patients who aren't really patients. They're trained actors. They're people that carry. They carry they're in the union and the whole bit, and they actually go ahead and these people are trained to act in certain ways, and they actually grade the performance of their examination and their history taking on these trained actors. So I still don't think that that's the total answer. I think that there's a lot more that has to be done. But I think at least there is a recognition that medicine has to get back to its roots. That's one of the reasons I wrote Medicine from the Heart. I wanted to doctors are going through a real tough time right now. They're being hit from every angle with a lot of different real-life issues. I wanted doctors to be able to read some of these things and to be able to say, hey, this is why we all started out. I'm glad I was reminded of it. And I also wanted to write it for the kids that are starting out today so that they could see that, these things are possible. And that I just sort of have to gear my life a little bit differently from the first step. But I can achieve this type of thing where my patients become my friends, and it's a family type affair. It's not just a face passing through on the assembly line.
Final 30 seconds we got here. What will the next books be about? You've got a couple of things you're working on.
Probably the next two books are going to be books of essays. The next one's going to be called Medicine Between the Lines, and it's going to be more of the factual stuff that I do investigative reporting on, about managed care, about smallpox vaccine, what really happened with anthrax, malpractice, that type of thing. So we're going to bring two books, again, about this size, about 50 essays in each book. My novel Keystone is still going to come out. Probably going to go ahead and do some more with possibly bringing Cassidy back out. I have a couple other novels in the back of my head, one which is dynamite about actually something happened at a Disney World. I can't wait.
I don't see how you get the time to do this, but maybe you got to come back when those books are out, and we'll figure this out.
Look forward to it.
Medicine from the Heart by Dr. Bernard Leo Remakus is published by iUniverse. You can get more information about this and other books that we've featured on Off the Page by going to our website at WSKG.com, where you'll also find the audio archive for this and other programs in the series. Dr. Remakus, thanks very much. Feel a lot better coming to see us today.
Bill, thank you.
Off the Page returns in 2 weeks, and next time,